Coronado, California, September 5th, 1945. The war is over. Japan signed the surrender documents 3 days ago on the deck of USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. An admiral is home, 61 years old, gaunt, visibly worn. The kind of worn that doesn't come from a single campaign, but from years of accumulated decisions pressed into the face and the frame. He is at a welcome home party. He tells his wife he doesn't feel well. At 10 minutes past 5 in the afternoon, Vice Admiral John S. McCain Sr. dies of a heart attack. His death is front-page news across the United States. Why? What had this man just done? What had this gaunt, drink-weathered admiral carried across the Pacific and back that made a nation stop when his heart gave out at his own welcome home party, 4 days after the war ended? The harbor at Kure, Japan. July 24th, 1945, 1,747 sorties in a single day. The sky above a Japanese harbor, packed with American aircraft, Hellcats and Helldivers, Corsairs and Avengers, their engines filling the summer air above the Seto Inland Sea from horizon to horizon. Ships at anchor below, unable to move. A fleet that had once terrorized the Pacific from Pearl Harbor to Singapore, waiting in the harbor where it was born. What happened here? What did it cost to bring America to this moment? And who paid the price when the moment was done? Kure is a place before it is a target. The city sits 20 kilometers southeast of Hiroshima on the edge of the Seto Inland Sea. Mountains rise on 3 sides, steep, green, terraced with gun emplacements by 1945. The harbor faces south, sheltered by mountainous islands that break the open sea into calm channels. In summer, the water runs pale green and silver between the hills. The air smells of salt and iron and, by the middle of 1945, of smoke. Kure had been Japan's forge of naval power for half a century. Its naval arsenal could build anything afloat: cruisers, carriers, the largest warships in history. In 1940, the yards here launched the Yamato, the heaviest battleship ever constructed, armed with 9 46-centimeter guns, so large that nothing afloat could match their range or their weight of shell. The harbor that built the Yamato was, for a generation, the physical expression of Japan's ambition at sea. She's already gone. The Yamato sailed from these waters on April 6, 1945, on a one-way mission toward Okinawa, and was sunk by carrier aircraft the following day. What remains of Japan's combined fleet has gathered at Kure. Battleships, carriers, cruisers, not by choice. They have no fuel. American mining operations have quietly closed the sea lanes, and the ships that might once have sortied across the Pacific are trapped at anchor. Their hulls are camouflaged with netting and cut vegetation. Their gun barrels are swiveled skyward. They have been repurposed as floating anti-aircraft batteries, the greatest surface fleet in Asian history, reduced to the role of gun platforms for a harbor defense. They can't fight. They can only die hard. U.S. Navy intelligence estimates more than 160 large-caliber anti-aircraft weapons ring the harbor's hills and ship decks, with hundreds of smaller-caliber guns supplementing them. Torpedo attack is impossible. The shallow harbor waters mean any ship struck will simply settle on the muddy bottom rather than sink. Everything must come from above. Dive bombers will have to press straight down into that wall of fire, and Japan has already begun making choices about how to spend what remains of its air power. An invasion is coming. Everyone in Japan's high command knows it. When the Americans land on the home islands, the defenders will need everything they have. The best pilots, the best aircraft. Those are being preserved, set aside. The harbor's conventional air defense will be managed with what is left after the reserves are set aside. There is a dress rehearsal, and it costs. March 18th, 1945. 1 day before the first American carrier strike on Kure. The USS Franklin is launching her second strike of the morning. aircraft fully loaded, sitting on the flight deck, engines turning. A Japanese aircraft has threaded through the defensive screen without detection. 2 bombs fall, the first detonates on the deck, the second goes through. It is the worst damage inflicted on an American warship that survived the war. Fires reach the loaded aircraft on the flight deck and in the hangar below. Weapons detonate in sequence. The explosions are visible for miles. 724 of Franklin's crew are killed. 265 more are wounded. The ship saves herself. Her crew fights the fires for hours while Franklin drifts, dead in the water, 20 kilometers from the Japanese coast. She survives. Most of her crew does not. This happens the day before the first strike on Kure. The bill for entry to Japanese home waters has been submitted before the main attack even begins. March 19th, Task Force 58, under Vice Admiral Mark Mitchell, turns its aircraft toward the primary naval base of the Japanese home islands. Mitchell is 57, bird-boned and exhausted, the long-billed cap he wears backward pulled low over deep-lined eyes. He rarely sleeps more than a few hours. He knows the March raid will be the first time American carrier aircraft have ever struck Kure, and he knows what is waiting in those hills. The strike force numbers 321 aircraft, Helldivers, Avengers, Hellcats, Corsairs, almost exactly the size of the force the Imperial Japanese Navy sent to Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Some of the planners know that number. Some of them say it aloud. The strike coordinator is Commander George M. Ottinger. His orders are specific: oil storage tanks and shore installations, the harbor infrastructure. The fleet in the anchorage is secondary. He takes off with the first wave and flies toward Kure. Then he looks down. Below him, arranged in the calm water of the harbor, is the assembled might of the Imperial Japanese Navy. 3 battleships, 4 carriers, 10 other warships, moored together, camouflaged and still. Ottinger is a strike coordinator with authority to deviate from his orders. He considers what he has been told to bomb and what he can see. He deviates. First, half the bombers turn away from the oil tanks, target the ships. Then, within minutes, the decision hardens further. All the bombers go to the ships. The planned targets on shore will wait. 1 man, in a cockpit, above the Japanese fleet, alone with the decision. He makes it. 20 Grumman F-6F Hellcats of Fighter-Bomber Squadron 17 sweep ahead and above the strike. Over Kure, they meet 40 fighters from the 343rd Kokutai, Japan's elite naval air unit, its best remaining pilots flying the Kawanishi N-1K2J, one of the finest fighters Japan produced. These are not inexperienced men in obsolete aircraft. The fight lasts 25 minutes. 6 Americans go down, 4 Japanese. The bombers press through anti-aircraft fire that Task Force 58's aviators will later describe as the most intense they have ever experienced. Black puffs filling every altitude, the concussive thump of near misses rattling airframes, tracer rounds arcing upward in continuous curtains. They hit all 4 battleships. They hit the carrier Ryuho with 3 bombs and 2 rockets. No ships are sunk. The fleet below is intact. Ottinger and 35 of his men receive the Navy Cross. They fly home knowing something they don't yet have words for. America can reach Kure. America cannot yet break it. The interval between March and July is not empty. It is where the conditions for what follows are quietly assembled. The fleet at Kure is already dying on its own. In April, the heavy cruiser Aoba, declared irreparable the previous December, is struck again in an air raid and settles into the harbor mud. The carrier Amagi is permanently moored at an island in the anchorage and covered with camouflage netting, hidden like something ashamed to be seen. B-29s hit the Hero Naval Aircraft Factory in May. More mines go into the sea approaches. On July 1st, a single air raid destroys 40% of the city of Kure itself. The fleet is not simply waiting for the carriers to return. It is being consumed by degrees. On May 28th, command of the Fast Carrier Task Force passes to Vice Admiral John S. Slew McCain Sr. He is 60 years old, short, gaunt in the manner of a man who has been running at a deficit for years. Deep lines in the face, prominent bones, eyes that stopped softening things a long time ago. He earned his naval aviator wings at 51, came to carrier aviation late in a career built on battleships and cruisers, and led that arm at its apex in the Pacific. He is gruff, profane, given to drink and to gamble. He works from the flag bridge of USS Shangri-La, and from the moment he takes command, he does not want to attack Kure. His objection is tactical. The ships are immobilized. They cannot threaten the invasion. The harbor's anti-aircraft defenses are among the heaviest concentrations in Japan, sending aviators against floating scrap metal that poses no operational threat will cost men that cannot be replaced. He makes this case to Admiral William F. Halsey, Jr., who commands the Third Fleet. Halsey overrules him. The fleet must be destroyed, visibly, completely, finally. The argument ends there. Then, the typhoon. June 4th, Typhoon Connie sweeps toward Task Force 38. McCain recommends heading east, which would put the fleet clear of the storm's path. Halsey agrees, but waits for more information before committing to a course. By the time he orders a heading, he selects one that takes the fleet into the storm rather than away from it. 6 men die. 33 ships are damaged. USS Pittsburgh loses her bow. Dozens of aircraft are swept overboard. The subsequent court of inquiry places primary blame for the course decision on Halsey. Secondary blame falls on McCain for a 20-minute delay in handling a subordinate's request. The blame is unequal, but McCain is more vulnerable than Halsey, and Admiral Nimitz decides a change in command is warranted. On July 15, 1945, John S. McCain Sr. is informed that he will hand over Task Force 38 to Vice Admiral John Towers on September 1st. His next assignment, Deputy Head of the Veterans Administration. He is to manage the administrative processing of men returning from a war he will no longer be fighting. 9 days later, he orders the most devastating carrier strike of the Pacific War. July 24th, 1945. The sky above Kure fills with American engines before most of the city is fully awake. 1,747 sorties in a single day. Task Force 38 is not conducting a raid. It is conducting a sustained air campaign, measured in hours, against a target that cannot run, cannot fight back at range, cannot do anything but fire upward and trust that the mathematics of anti-aircraft fire will eventually favor the defense. They do not. The combined fleet's flagship, the light cruiser, or Yodo, is struck by 4 500-pound bombs before noon. The cruiser Tone is hit by 3 bombs and sinks. The cruiser Aoba, already settled into harbor mud from the April raid, is bombed again. A second death for a ship that had never recovered from its first. The ex-battleship Setsu is grounded by a bomb hit and 5 near misses. The carrier Aso catches fire. The cruiser Iwate is never struck by a single bomb. 3 near-miss detonations create enough concussive pressure to crack her hull, and she sinks in shallow water the following day, killed by proximity alone. The harbor does not swallow these ships. It holds them. Kure is too shallow for the clean disappearance of the open ocean. Ships flood and tilt and settle slowly, listing, burning at their moorings, hulls resting in the mud while crews scramble across angling decks. Some burn for days. They are visible from the hills, visible from the city. The harbor, built to be impregnable, has become a display case for defeat. And above all of it, almost no Japanese fighters. The anti-aircraft guns are firing, thousands of rounds, black puffs filling every altitude, tracers arcing upward in sustained curtains. The gunners on those hillsides and those ship decks are fighting with everything they have. but the interceptors that might have met over 1,800 sorties with something like an organized defense are largely absent. Japan held them back. The best pilots, the best aircraft, preserved for the invasion, set aside for the landings on the home islands that every planner in Tokyo is certain will come. The anti-aircraft gunners at Kure are fighting alone because a decision was made, months ago and far from her, that their battle was not the one worth winning. The aircraft held back for that invasion are sitting somewhere inland, fueled and armed, waiting for a battle that will never come. What is happening at Kure, and what will happen 20 kilometers away in 3 weeks, will end the war before any invasion is necessary. The defenders of this harbor are being sacrificed for a contingency that no longer exists. They don't know it. Neither does anyone else. July 24th is not the end. It is the first day. 4 days later, the carriers return. July 28th, Shangri-La launches the second wave against a harbor already altered, listing hulls, burned superstructures, smoke rising from ships that have been smoldering since the 24th. What remains is finished now. The battleship Haruna, already damaged 4 days earlier, absorbs more bombs on July 28th than any other Japanese battleship receives in the entire war. Aviators from Shangri-La and USS Wasp concentrate on her, hit after hit, until she is holed on her port side, takes on water steadily, and sinks next to the pier. 65 of her 1,360 crew die. The Oyodo, struck by 4 bombs on July 24th, absorbs 4 more on July 28th and capsizes in shallow water. 300 of her crew are killed. The carrier Amagi, abandoned after the first raid, is bombed again where she sits. Her sister Katsuragi is torn open, 20 feet of port hull and 30 feet of flight deck, gone in a single detonation. The cruiser Izumo, like Iwate before her, never receives a direct bomb hit. 3 near-miss detonations on July 28th are sufficient. She capsizes, operating alongside Task Force 38, Task Force 37, built around the British carriers HMS Formidable, Indefatigable, and Victorious, strikes targets throughout the inland sea. For British air crews, these waters carry a weight that American accounts often leave unspoken. This is the Navy that sank HMS Prince of Wales and Repulse off Malaya in December 1941, within hours, without losing a ship of its own, demonstrating in a single afternoon that Britain could not protect its Asian empire against carrier aviation. The men in those British cockpits are not spectators in someone else's reckoning. They are parties to their own. When the last aircraft return to their carriers, the tally is final. 1 carrier, 3 battleships, 5 cruisers, dozens of smaller vessels sunk or settled. Nearly 700 Japanese aircraft destroyed or damaged across the operation. American losses: 126 aircraft, 102 aircrew killed. 1 capital ship remains in Japan's inventory, the battleship Nagato, at Yokosuka. Fuel tanks dry, waiting. British naval historian Stephen Roskill wrote that the destruction of Japan's battleships and heavy cruisers at Kure was seen as avenging the losses suffered by the United States at Pearl Harbor. What he described is a symmetry that is not metaphorical, but geographical. The fleet that launched the December 7th attack, a surprise carrier strike on a fleet at anchor in a harbor it believed itself safe in, has been destroyed by a surprise carrier strike on a fleet at anchor in a harbor it believed itself safe in. The harbor that built the Yamato watched that age end in its own anchorage. The circle is closed. Someone paid the price to close it. Now the harbor is still. The ships that cannot sink lie on the mud, their hulls visible above the waterline at low tide, burned and listing, embedded in the bottom of a harbor designed for their protection. Kure was built to be impregnable from the sea. No surface ship ever threatened it. The enemy came from the sky, from carriers that never entered gun range, from an air arm Japan had once led the world in developing and then watched surpass it entirely. The geometry that shielded the harbor from the ocean offered nothing against what came from above. The man who paid the price to close that circle is already sailing home. September 2nd, 1945. He stands on the deck of USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, among the witnesses as Japan signs the documents of surrender. The war is officially over. He watches it end. Then he boards a transport and flies home to Coronado, California, for the first time in months. September 5th, a welcome home party. His wife, his family, whatever a man accumulates over 6 decades. He tells his wife he doesn't feel well. The following afternoon, September 6th, 1945, at 10 minutes past 5, John Sidney McCain Sr. dies of a heart attack. He is 61 years old. He has outlasted the war by 4 days. He never had a peacetime day. The last public act of his life was watching Japan surrender. The last great act of his command was a strike he had opposed, ordered by a man already told his career was finished, against a harbor that cost him aircraft and men he could not replace. He ordered it anyway. He executed it well. Then he came home to a party, and he died. He and his son, Vice Admiral John S. McCain, Jr., became the first father and son pair to reach 4-star rank in the United States Navy. His grandson, Senator John S. McCain III, was shot down over a country Japan once occupied and spent 5.5 years as a prisoner of war. 3 men, 1 name, waters and skies shaped in part by what happened at Kure. There is one more thing, 20 kilometers from Kure, 3 weeks after the last bomb fell on the fleet, August 6, 1945. A single B-29 named Enola Gay crosses the coast at high altitude and releases a single weapon over Hiroshima. The sailors who had manned the anti-aircraft guns on Kure's hillsides, who had fired upward through 2 days in July against waves of American aircraft they could not stop, were 20 kilometers from what fell that morning. Some of them survived July 24th and July 28th, only to die on August 6th. Some survived everything and went home. The exact count is not known. The Kure raids were the last great conventional naval campaign of the Pacific War. The weapons that destroyed Japan's fleet, bombs dropped from aircraft with human beings inside them, guided by the judgment of men in cockpits, belonged to a way of fighting that had been the dominant form of destruction for 4 years. 3 weeks after those raids ended, a weapon fell on Hiroshima that made everything that came before it, including the carriers that had destroyed the fleet, instantly secondary as an instrument of destruction. The last great naval strike in American history and the weapon that ended all naval history are separated by 20 kilometers and 3 weeks. The men who dove into the anti-aircraft fire over Kure's harbor, who lost 102 of their number, bringing a fleet of dead ships to its final rest. They did not know what was coming. Nobody did. The Kure raids were the last act of the old war. American aircraft dropped naval mines in the approaches to Kure's harbor beginning in March 1945. They went into the water at night from aircraft flying low and fast, and they sat on the seabed. Some detonated in 1945. Some did not. They corroded slowly in the salt water over years, over decades. Clearing them was tedious and life-threatening, divers working in cold, dark water to find ordnance that still had the capacity to kill. The work continued long after every sailor who had anchored in that harbor, on either side, was dead of old age. The war at Kure did not end on a date. It faded out on the seabed, slowly, a piece at a time over a generation. The inland sea is pale and still now. The mountains stand at the water's edge, the same mountains that held the guns. No ships, no smoke, no sound of engines. The water does not remember. But we can.